Okay. I want to welcome our audience, any other guests. I want to welcome our members and our interpreter to the Mayor's Commission for Citizens with Disabilities for the City of Omaha. Um, I'm not really sure if we're rebroadcasting these, but I know that these can be seen on the mayor's website. Uh, that's at www.cityofomaha.org. One clicks on the mayor's office, and then if you click on Disabilities Commission, it'll take you to a list of the YouTubes of our meetings. Um, our meetings have not been formal for quite a while now. Because of COVID and the fact that we've been doing a lot of our work over doing it virtually. Um, but we do have our discussions, we have our presentations, and we have our notes. Um, so, very briefly, I want to remind everyone that the Mayor's Commission for Citizens with Disabilities was established to promote the quality of life, accessibility, and equity in all aspects related to the city of Omaha on behalf of those and in cooperation with citizens of Omaha who experience disabilities. To this end, we advise the mayor, the city council, city departments, and other personnel on issues of access, representation, employment, housing, quality of life, as it affects citizens with disabilities and their respective families. We serve as a resource for Omaha citizens with disabilities and their families to bring concerns forward and attempt to support resolution of issues that affect them. We publicize to the City of Omaha the role of the Commission and the resources available to assist persons with disabilities, employers, housing representatives, business owners, engineers, and architects, and others who have a role in bettering the life of Omaha citizens. We work to promote awareness to the general public on the capabilities, needs, and desires of persons with disabilities. We attempt to publicly recognize the efforts of employers, businesses, schools, and other organizations who have demonstrated support of persons with programs and services for persons with disabilities. We work to advocate for accessibility issues and implement plans and projects to help improve services. I just want to rush this, services for citizens with disabilities. And we review and implement plans and projects in terms of advocating for services for citizens with disabilities in terms of city projects and planning. Um, okay. I do want to inform you that we will probably have some announcements at the end. So have a paper and pencil or pen handy to take notes if you so desire. Um, I want to go ahead and take the opportunity to have our members introduce themselves and the part of the community they're here to represent. My name is Mark Smith, as can be told by the name badge there. I'm on the faculty of the University of Nebraska Medical Center at the Monroe Meyer Institute University Center for Excellence for Citizens with Disabilities. I'm also the parent and sibling to family members who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and I am your chair. So I'll call you guys out because it's kind of the Brady Bunch on the TV screen. Megan, do you want to go ahead? And Megan, you're frozen. We'll come back to Megan. How about Rachel?
All right, hello, I'm Rachel Johnson. I have lived with a spinal cord injury for almost 9 years. I've worked with individuals with acquired disabilities and currently work with individuals with developmental disabilities and here to represent the needs of those population.
Thanks, Rachel. Taryn?
I represent the population of disabilities, physical disabilities, and I also work with the elderly going out into the community that also have disabilities.
Okay, thank you, Taryn. Megan, we'll try again. And you're frozen again. Or not. Yeah, your
Sorry.
What? Your,
Megan Walls,
yeah, Megan's having some signal problems. Lisa?
Yes, I'm Reverend Dr. Lisa Sherman. I'm the pastor at Faith Christian Church. I also serve on the State of Nebraska Emergency Management Advisory Council, and I have 5 children with a wide range of disabilities, and I'm here to advocate for them.
Okay, and I'll introduce Megan on her behalf. I think she's probably trying to get linked back on. Megan Walls is actually our vice chair, and she's the director of Assistology Services. I hope I said that plainly enough, and covered for me at our last meeting. So I'm extremely grateful to Megan, and hopefully she'll be able to rejoin us in a moment. I do want to mention we did have a pre-meeting. We do not have a quorum. There were a couple points of discussions. One being the desire for the city to, oh, Jennifer, I didn't get you. I'm sorry. Want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, my name is Jen Pollack. I facilitate elementary special education services for Millard Public Schools, and it's a pleasure to be a part of the board.
Thanks, Jen. And Megan, can you go?
I will try. Megan Walls with Cystology. I do consulting and training around issues that impact the greater disability community. So I am the vice chair on this commission, and I try to bring a voice to the broader disability community issues.
Thanks, Megan. Sorry, I kind of partially introduced you while you were offline, but I should add too, in my work, I work primarily with persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities and represent that population on the committee, on the council, sorry. I was getting into the pre-meeting. We had 2, I think, topics of discussion, well, actually 3. The first one is a desire on the part of the Human Resources Department for the city for us to start to plan to resume in-person meetings. And we had I think, a good discussion about that. One of the things I think was kind of a unanimous thought or point was that we do want to keep the option for Zoom links for that occasion when somebody can join but can only join virtually in terms of the membership, but then also for the people that we serve, we're here to serve, that allows folks that maybe don't have the transportation or the physical capacity to bring an issue or to bring something in front of the council. So our commission, I just can't get this straight today. I'm talking to myself, of course. In any case, Gerald Kuhn addressed the commission and really encouraged us to start looking at trying to get more people here so we can establish a quorum and do our business officially. Gerald also shared that he has several applications for members. As we're down in our membership a little bit. We're really down to about 10, and I'm extremely grateful to the members who have been able to come in person or have been consistently attending virtually. We were able to at least continue our work to a degree all through the pandemic, and that is an outcome of having very committed and very willing members of the commission to keep coming on and to keep trying to push the needle forward. We're hoping that if we can start to meet more in person, that will take us even further in that direction. The second was, it was brought up in the last meeting, and several people voiced support for resuming memos to the city. We've kind of fallen out of that practice over the last year or so. And we talked about some logistics and putting some ideas in place in terms of getting not only that, but also some more some more information that we can get out, like, for example, something akin to the HRR brochure as an option. And so that's something we'll continue to pursue. Then finally and briefly, Mr. Keith Station came on for a few minutes and talked about the fact that they're waiting for us to give him a name of a member of this commission. There's just too many committees, councils, and commissions for me to keep straight. On their diversity and inclusion committee, and we have a couple folks who've expressed interest, and hopefully we'll be getting a name to Mr. Station shortly, so that folks with disabilities, I mean, diversity and inclusion is, I can't tell you to the extent to which equity, diversity, and inclusion are issues within the disability space, not only in Omaha, but statewide and nationally. It's just a really significant topic. So in any case, given that we don't have a quorum, we didn't do anything with minutes, we didn't have any minutes to approve, and we're just working off the agenda as an operating agenda. So at this point, I want to introduce our presenter, Mr. Brad Murins. Brad is here representing Disability Rights Nebraska, which is the federally funded protection and advocacy program for the state of Nebraska. Every state has, and I think every territory as well, has a protection and advocacy program. I've worked with Disability Rights for a year. They have an amazing impact in terms of supporting persons with disabilities on a number of levels, but primarily around advocacy and advocating and ensuring individual rights are addressed for persons with disabilities, not only in Omaha, but statewide. So with that, can I call you up, Brad? Brad, I should warn you ahead of time that Brad and I share the unfortunate habit of being total policy wonks. So we have been engaged in many spirited discussions over the years, even going all the way as far back as this morning. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brad.
Well, thank you, Mark, and it's my pleasure to be here. So I thought I would give you a little background.
Is the red light on your?
Oh, yeah. It's on?
There you go.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. Let me pull up my slides here. So good afternoon. My name is Brad Murins, and I am the Public Policy Director at Disability Rights Nebraska. As Mark said, Disability Rights Nebraska is the designated protection and advocacy organization for persons with disabilities in Nebraska. We are a statewide nonprofit organization focused on advocating and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities here in Nebraska. And Mark is also correct. Every state and territory has a protection and advocacy organization for that state and or territory. Again, we are the protection and advocacy agency or organization for individuals with disabilities in Nebraska. So here's a picture of our staff from a year or two ago. And we've been advocating and protecting for the rights of Nebraskans with disabilities since 1978. So in 1978, Governor Exon designated Nebraska Advocacy Services as the protection and advocacy system for Nebraska. In 2012, we changed our name from Nebraska Advocacy Services to Disability Rights Nebraska. We thought that change led people to our organization and didn't get them confused with Nebraska Advocacy Services. We obviously were created to assist individuals with disabilities and their families in protecting and advocating for their rights. We promote the principles of equality, self-determination, and dignity of persons with disabilities. We are a private 501c3. We are independent of any public or private agency which provides treatment or services to persons with disabilities in Nebraska. And our board of directors is composed of individuals with disabilities, family members, and other people who are interested in the rights of persons with disabilities. To the left of the screen, you'll see that there's our website address there. And we have a video series in which we have recorded why we do what we do. And I would also point out in the packet that I have provided for you, I would suggest that you look at our vision statement and the strategic plan document that's in the handouts that you have either here or virtually. So what do we do and how do we do it? Well, again, on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see two red links, goals and objectives and strategic plan. Those are also included in your handouts, and those links there are hyperlinked to the portions of our website which I spell out what our goals and objectives are and what our strategic plan is. But again, our main charge is to help secure the rights, enhance the dignity, and advocate for the full participation of persons with disabilities as citizens in Nebraska. So to this end, we engage in legal advocacy, relationship-based advocacy, systems advocacy, and public policy analysis and education. And I'll go through all of those step by step. Legal advocacy. Through our staff of attorneys and case advocates, we offer systemic and individual advocacy through the legal process. Individual advocacy, including investigating abuse and neglect allegations. Direct legal representation within the selected priority areas to ensure that the rights of persons with disabilities are not being violated. We provide advice on legal rights and remedies, information about disability rights and services, and often make referrals to other agencies that serve persons with disabilities. Our kind of motto is, if we can't help you, we'll help you find someone who can. But in order to receive representation, an individual must meet certain eligibility requirements and have a legal problem that's associated with the disability and that falls within our organizational priorities, which will follow. I've also included in your handout or in your packet and handout a fact sheet and eligibility guidelines, which will help clarify what those sort of parameters are in our organizational priorities that we have to work within for legal representation. I've also included over on the left-hand side a link to one of our more recent case that we had with Michael Argani versus Creighton University, if you wanted to get a sample of some of the things that we address in our legal advocacy. And I'm not an attorney with our organization, so I will refer you, if you have any specific, more direct legal questions, I would refer you to our office. Tanya Diaz is our legal director. Relationship-based advocacy. Well, we call it citizen advocacy and value-based programs. And again, on the left, you'll have two hyperlinks which will direct you to the portions of our website which talk specifically about our value-based programs and our value-based strategies. There are two. Citizen advocacy. Citizen advocacy is a way for communities to respond to the needs of protection of individuals with disabilities who are at risk of abuse or neglect. Local, independently operated citizen advocacy offices will create one-to-one matches between citizens in that community and vulnerable people with disabilities in that community. Disability Rights Nebraska will provide consultation on program development, training, and evaluation to these citizen advocacy offices. We also engage in value-based strategies, which means that we conduct and/or host educational trainings around social roles, social values, and self-advocacy. Systems advocacy and public policy. On the left, you'll find two links which will direct you to our webpage, which has our legislative updates and our legislative agenda. You also have a copy of the legislative agenda, our legislative priorities, in the handout, in the packet that I've handed out to you both here and virtually, if you wanted to get a sense of what issues we were addressing on the legislative policy front during this legislative session. Disability Rights Nebraska is one of a few protection and advocacy organizations around the country who are mutually engaged in both the legal and the policy legislative systems advocacy. We educate state, primarily, and some federal, senators and officials about policies and legislation that impact Nebraskans with disabilities. Our legislative agenda outlines our legislative priorities. Our high priority legislation means that legislation will get testimony at a public hearing. We'll do extra time and attention from me on the legislation to see its outcome, whether it's to be passed or we oppose it. A medium priority legislation is only a support or oppose letter or a neutral letter. It's only a letter. It's not going to receive a lot of attention and extra time from me or our office. We also provide input on regulations and other policy matters, both state and federal. And we also bring legislation to senators as well as provide feedback for their ideas. So some examples of the issues that we've been involved in the recent years around legislation and our policy work. Most recently, we were involved in Legislative Bill 323 to reform the Medicaid Insurance for Workers with Disabilities program, which would allow individuals with disabilities to make above poverty wages and still retain their Medicaid benefits. We brought Legislative Bill 540 to the legislature. That corrects omissions within the state civil rights language around disability. We noticed that that disability was omitted in several areas around the civil rights statutes here in Nebraska, so we brought a bill to fix that. We've been involved in the Legislative Bill 147 and its prodigy around restraint and seclusion and discipline in schools. We brought LR, Legislative Resolution 314, which would have been a study on restraint and seclusion use in schools. We were instrumental in bringing LB 343, which would replace the R word, or mental retardation and all of its derivatives, from state statute as an outdated language. So again, we provide information about service animals and housing under LB 309. We worked with Senator McCollister and others around providing information and delineating what the federal and state rights and responsibilities are for both those who have service and support animals and those individuals who offer housing. We were involved in Legislative Bill 1083, which was a while ago in 2004, but that pretty much reformed the system of mental health and behavioral health care from one that was institution-based to one that is community-based. And in particular, we were directly involved in creating and advocating for the Office of Consumer Affairs within the behavioral health, mental health service system. We were recently involved in testifying on Legislative Resolution 139 when we talked about the sub-minimum wages paid to some persons with disabilities here in Nebraska, and we offered a thank you and thanks for the state, the legislature working on enhancing and reforming the Medicaid buy-in. That's LB 323 that was above. And lastly, another example is that we worked to create the Office of Public Guardian, the Office of Consumer Affairs, as we said before, and the statewide ADA coordinator position and the ADA task force. So our work in the legislative and policy arena spans both pure legislation and looking at bills and resolutions, but it also encompasses working behind the scenes, not necessarily with looking at policy and legislation, but working to create avenues and offices which would help individuals with disabilities beyond just the pure legislative framework. So as we see it, here are our 7 core public policy strategies. We collaborate with other organizations around public policy issues and legislation. We testify at legislative and regulatory hearings. We would submit letters to policymakers on legislation and/or disability issues. We will often write op-eds about specific legislation or policy issues. We publish research reports on a variety of disability issues. We write and disseminate position statements on emerging disability issues, and that we also then work to develop and/or support self-advocates. Collaboration and public outreach is another instrumental piece of what we do. Our public policy activities we see them as another tool for public communication and awareness about our organization and disability issues. And you can see here I've listed several organizations, coalitions that I participate in. This is just a sample, but just to give you an idea that we are engaged in the community and we're engaged with other organizations to raise awareness and to share awareness of disability issues. We have 3 priority areas for fiscal year 22. The first priority area is freedom from harm, and this will help guide our work that we talked earlier, legislative, legal, citizen advocacy. These will all be kind of guided by our priorities 1, 2, and 3. So priority 1 is freedom from harm. We will protect and advocate for vulnerable people with disabilities, especially those living in segregated, isolated, and congregated facilities that ensure that they are not abused, neglected, or having their rights violated. On our website, you will notice on the left, there's 2 links. Our restraint and seclusion work and our incidents at LifeQuest investigating that facility are contained within priority 1. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, the 3 goals that will outline our work with this priority 1, freedom from harm. Priority 2, most inclusive settings. Again, on the left, you'll have some links to our website, which outline some of the work that we do underneath our priority 2 of most inclusive settings. We work on home and community-based services, our shelter, workshop, and sub-minimum wage issues, service and support animals, and the waiting list are some of the examples of the work that we do underneath this heading. People with disabilities need access to authentic opportunities in order to be fully included in communities of their choice. And you'll notice that the bullet points here on the right-hand side outline the 3 particular goal areas which will guide our work underneath priority 2. Priority 3, engaging people with disabilities in advocacy. On the left, there's a few things here. The first is a link to our public policy internship. We conduct an internship for 2 individuals with disabilities. We like to have them around college-age individuals to get them exposed to public policy work, to increase the recognition of disability, and to start to make connections between those interns and legislators and the public policy legislature framework in general. We believe in the philosophy of nothing about us without us, and will stand with people who have disabilities to achieve their hopes, dreams, and things not yet imagined. We also do a lot of presentations around advocacy. We do an Advocacy 101, which kind of outlines the basic ideas and concepts of advocacy. And I also do several presentations around developing an advocacy plan. We've developed some materials around developing advocacy plans, and we've provided this information and training to a host of individuals and organizations. We also assist people with disabilities to help them prepare testimony, letters, or other advocacy and input. If a person with a disability wants to make a statement or needs some help collecting their thoughts, I'm here to help. I always tell the interns and anyone that I'm assisting with their testimony or letters or other input, I always say, I'm not going to tell you what to say, but I'll help you say it. I'll help you format it in a way that works for whatever body that you're trying to address, and I'll help you. I won't tell you what to say, but I'll help you say it. And there's also, some miscellaneous work that we do as an organization. We conduct and publish policy research. So here are 3 examples of some policy research and reports that we've produced. The Students at Risk with Only Guidance for Protection. We did that in 2014, looking at the regulation of restraint and seclusion in schools here in Nebraska. We did a literature review of public guardianship in preparation for the development of the Office of Public Guardian. And we've most recently produced a report around the pandemic called A Widening Divide, and talking about the effect of the pandemic on persons with disabilities here in Nebraska. And some other miscellaneous activities around engagement. We've produced a lot of research and reports around COVID-19 activities. We have a blog archive in which we address a lot of variety of different issues that might not necessarily rise to the top idea or the level of legislation or policy, but are issues that are front and center in the lives of persons with disabilities. That might be something around a policy issue, but does not necessarily have to be. We are engaged in our community. We have a community engagement director, Sharon Omberger. So we're always looking to make new connections and strengthening connections with our community partners and new potential community partners. And we also have stakeholder lists and stakeholder groups around different types of disabilities, and we use those stakeholder groups to make announcements or to receive input on our goals and objectives. We receive input from the public every year about what our goals and objectives are, always looking for input around those. We're very open, so we're always trying to use those stakeholder connections and lists to make announcements or to share or gather information. And if you're interested in that, I've put Sharon's email here on my slide. She is our community engagement director. Or if you want to contact me, I know Sharon, I've got her email and her phone number. I can certainly pass a message along. Here is my contact information. If you have any questions about our organization, around our policy initiatives, our legislative agenda, if you're looking for someone to do a presentation, to provide information, certainly reach out, let me know. Email is probably the best way to get a hold of me, but certainly my office number is there, our fax number is there. There's also a generic information request on our website. If you wanted to request our services or wanted to get in touch with us at 2 o'clock in the morning when we're not when at least the office isn't up and working, we have a function on our website where you can get in touch with us and have that and reach out to us when it's most convenient for you. So that's kind of a basic rundown of what our organization is and what we do, kind of how we do it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that may be.
Questions? Go ahead, Gerald.
Gerald Kuhn, City of Omaha. How do you come up with legislation agenda for the legislative session.
Would you repeat the question?
Sure.
Because Gerald's off mic, so.
Sure. The question was, how do we come up with the legislative ideas or the legislation that we're going to put in our legislative agenda? That's a very good question. We have a legislative screening criteria. We look at a variety of different variables. We look at does the legislation or the policy issue fit within those three priority areas? If it does, is it something that we need to, what is the impact on persons with disabilities in Nebraska? We look at that issue. We look at, is there a trend on the national circuit? What information do we have? What's the impact? Is it going to be a wide impact? Is it a systemic issue? And then we will seek information from other organizations, other groups, our advisory council, our mental illness advisory council, our staff, and come up with a list of 10 to 20 pieces of legislation that we think are the most impactful, or that would most benefit from our activity. And I can certainly share that with you if you'd like the screening criteria in a more concrete format. I can certainly share that as well. But it's a very deliberative, slow, thoughtful, and heavily seeking input from a variety of different stakeholders, individuals, organizations. So we try to be as comprehensive as we can. I mean, I go through all 700 bills that get introduced every year, go through that and make our cut and make a second cut and a third cut. So we try to be as comprehensive and deliberative as possible.
Thanks, Brad.
Other questions? Well, I have a few questions, Brad.
Sure.
Actually, I have a two-parter, and if you want me to repeat it after you take on the first part, I'm happy to do it. I know that Disability Rights Nebraska took a central role in promoting the implementation of an Olmstead plan for the state of Nebraska, which is now currently in place and moving forward. And I think it is a really good example of something that used kind of all the parts of disability rights as an organization in the effort to promote that. The second part, which I'm happy to come back to, knowing that when we talk about guardianship and disability, most in the judicial system in the state, most people, if they show up in a guardianship hearing, and even there's no discussion of levels of guardianship, it's only full guardianship we see in many cases. And I know that disability rights is moving in the direction of trying to organize activities around supported decision-making as an alternative to full guardianship. So I thought those would be interesting for the group to hear, and in terms of maybe some very current issues.
Yes, you're right. Those are very current issues, and those are really big. Those are very big and important, significant policy issues for persons with disabilities here in Nebraska, and not just in Nebraska, but across the country. So yes, we've been pushing for and advocating for developing an Olmstead plan for persons with disabilities here in Nebraska. Nebraska is one of a few outlier states that have not developed a standalone Olmstead plan. An Olmstead plan is important because it allows individuals to avoid, well, I think on the surface level, now granted, I have to admit that this is not necessarily my project, so I can't speak to it as authoritatively as, for example, Diane Dallaire in our office, who has been working on this in particular.
I don't think anyone can, but that's just saying.
That is very true. But you know, the idea is that we can avoid unnecessary institutionalization for persons with disabilities. If they don't want to be in an institution and they don't need to be there, then we should look at finding alternative for those individuals not in an institution and seeing how we can provide support for them to be living in the community. And so yes, that is an ongoing issue. We've been working with the state and other organizations and consultants to try to help Nebraska develop a cohesive, comprehensive Olmstead plan. The other thing you talked about is guardianship and disability. That's a very timely issue. And yes, one of what we've been finding in our research and what we've been hearing from other organizations and other individuals is that, you know, a plenary guardianship, which is a fancy way of saying a full guardianship, which is a fancy way of saying that we're going to institute the full panoply of restrictions due to guardianship on an individual through the legal process, may not always be the best way to go. And so we've been advocating for an alternative to guardianship called supported decision making, which, you know, tries to rest the full restriction of rights due to a full guardianship, and really try to get at how do we support individuals in making their own decisions where they can. And so it's an alternative to the full guardianship issue, and really trying to get at a better fit for individuals than just you know, putting them under the full guardianship and then saying, you know, here you go. So I know we have been working on this issue for a couple of years now. We are engaged in an initiative to increase awareness and bring recognition to supported decision making as an alternative to guardianship. So we'll be working on that. In fact, we've got a meeting on Thursday to try to see how else we can push forward with our group and our advocacy. But yes, we've been advocating for this idea of supported decision making as an alternative to the full guardianship, so we can help individuals with disabilities preserve their rights as much as they can in making their own decisions.
Okay. Other questions for Brad?
I was wondering, what's the major source of funding for Disability Rights Nebraska, given that you guys operate as a nonprofit, right?
Yeah, yes, correct. And that's a very good question. The majority of our funds come from the federal government. We operate I think it's 7 or 8 different funding streams which will fund our work. So for example, the work that we do around mental illness comes from our mental illness grant. Any work we do around developmental disability comes from our developmental disability protection and advocacy grant from the Fed. So the majority of our work comes from the federal government. We do receive some state funds to operate, for example, our citizen advocacy program. And we do receive some level of, you know, private donations and those contracts and those sort of donation funds. But the majority of it is federally funded. And I think if you look at the guideline sheet, I think it outlines what those 7 priority areas are. And if not there, we have that listed prominently on our website. So that's another place where you could find out what those particular areas are. And I think on our website, it lists the amounts, and I would also then direct you to the annual report that I've included in the handouts, which will, I think, can give you a good picture of what our funds were looking like for the last year.
Okay, thank you. And then a second question I had is, so when people are coming to us as the Mayor's Commission for Assistance with Disabilities, presenting issues like not being able to access certain communities or parts of their neighborhood having accessibility issues, or certain businesses, are those examples of issues that your organization would help to address as well?
Well, I think it would depend on what the issue is. But I always say, call and find out. I always say, don't answer the question before you ask it. Yes, certainly there are parameters about what we can and can't do. For example, if a person with a disability wanted to seek a divorce or we would not be able to handle that. We don't do family law. So that would be an example of one of those areas that maybe we wouldn't be able to handle. But I always say, make the phone call first. And I always say to people, I say, if it's an issue that we can't handle because of our parameters, I think we try to the best of our ability to find some answers for individuals and refer them to other agencies that might be able to handle that better than or straight up that we can't. But yeah, I always say call first. It never hurts to ask.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you, Brad, for the
Sure.
interesting and informative presentation. That was a lot of information. I have to confess that Brad and I are longtime colleagues. The part of the federal guidance that funds disability rights, it comes from the same legislation that funds university centers for excellence in developmental disabilities. So, along with the Developmental Disabilities Council in the state, we kind of run in the same lane. A couple things quickly. Was there follow-up, and I apologize as I wasn't at the last meeting and didn't really see if there was follow-up. The emergency disaster management preparedness training, was there follow-up we needed to cover on that quickly, or where is that at? Because it was referenced in the pre-meeting, but.
I don't know if you all can hear me because my internet has not been great.
Can hear you.
But the last I had heard, Gerald and Kat had a meeting set up, and with the Douglas County emergency management person, and the meeting did not end up taking place due to a conflict or a schedule change with the emergency management person. So they were going to get that rescheduled, and we were kind of on hold in terms of what we would do as a commission until they had that meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Megan.
Confirm that, Kat.
It is rescheduled for this Friday.
So more to come on that then.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Given that we have a few minutes, are there any announcements from the commission members? I'm getting a lot of head shakes.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's continued to be a part of the commission and made it possible for us to continue advocating. And I know it's been really hard throughout the pandemic. I personally had some issues where I feel like, oh, this is so much, but I'm just thankful I can continue to be here. And thank you, Mark and Megan, and just everyone, Dr. Reverend Sherman, Taryn, like Keith, everyone. I'm just so thankful to be able to know you all and have us all be part of this.
Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate that.
Oh, and Kat, definitely super thanks to Kat.
Well, Kat and Gerald and Kuhn and Dr. Franklin Thompson and the entire team there at the city. I have a announcement of something that's already gone by. Yesterday, the Monroe Meyer Institute had our annual trunk or treat. Now you might be thinking back to yesterday and thinking, wasn't that the second coming of the flood? I'm very happy to say that we had a good turnout of volunteers from our staff and families that came through so that their kiddos could experience at least some trick-or-treating with Halloween coming up. We've been doing this for several years now. It's been very popular. Typically, folks kind of dress their cars up, and then the kids trick or treat, and the candy's in the trunk. And I don't think there was a lot of dressed up cars yesterday, because it just would have all washed off. But so we had another successful event, and so we're really pleased because so often, especially in the time of COVID, kids that have either health challenges or disabilities don't really get to participate in some of the holiday activities. So, anything else for the good of the cause?
I actually have one more thing, actually.
Sure.
With the Department of Health and Human Services, they are always looking for, well, definitely right now, looking for individuals that would be interested in working as service coordinators or any other number of positions with folks with developmental disabilities. Yeah, in case any of you or anyone listening knows anyone that would be interested, you can look up the DHHS website for employment opportunities.
I would say the same is true for disability service providers. We're in this. I think we as a state have a 2% unemployment rate, which is a record. But one of the things that is leading to is we've had shortages of disability support workers across the board and across the state, but here in Omaha as well. And if you are interested in that type of work, you can either go to the Health and Human Services website under developmental disabilities. Rachel, is that correct? And if you're interested in support work, you can contact the Nebraska Association of Service Providers. And I don't have their website, but a couple things to share. One is that if you need to reach Nebraska Advocacy Services for any reason and are unable to, please contact me because I work very closely with Sharon and Brad and some of the folks that Brad raised. And somewhere I know I can find their email or telephone numbers, like in my cell phone address book. I can also provide access to the Nebraska Association of Service Providers or other job opportunities if that's an interest, because it's just been a really strange year and a half. What can I say? With that, I will adjourn this our meeting and thank the members who were able to come on virtually, and Mr. Keith Station, Kat Baker-Coleman, Gerald Kuhn, and Jamie, our interpreter, and our folks who are recording this for us. Thank you all, and we'll see you next month. We'll have, I believe, Miss Christy Burst from the Epilepsy Foundation presenting on the 15th. We moved our meeting date due to the fact that we would be meeting on the holiday week, and that could be challenging for a lot of our members and folks who might be wanting to talk to us or presenters, et cetera. So, am I correct in that, Megan? You're nodding. I'm hoping that means yes. You're right, Mark. Okay, I appreciate it. All right, thank you all, folks, and have a great month. We'll talk to you soon.